welcome to my channel. Today I think it would be interesting to look at JavaScript Closure and what it is, because it's a central idea in JavaScript in terms of variable scope. This is a function that creates a function, and this inner function here have access to the count variable because of the parent function. So after this create counter returns, which is finish the execution, the returned function, when we call it, it will still have access to the count variable. When this function was created, the count variable is still in scope. So that's why after the parent function finish executing, this function will still have access to the count variable. So that's what this closure means. So when you call the increment 3 times, it will give you 3 times of the count. So this is closure. So if we want to achieve the same style in Java, for example, we will use something like a class with a private variable so that the inner function have access to the private variable this way. And when we call the function, we will use this .count to refer to that so-called context within that function execution. The same style in JavaScript Closure. We don't really need a new class. We just create a function that create this increment function and put a variable outside of this inner function. And every time we call this increment, you will have access to this count variable, because when the function was created, this count variable is still in scope. So it's kind of carry that scope with it everywhere. And so we say that this increment function has closure over count. So the advantage of closure in this way is that it carries the context with it even after the creator function or outer function has finished. So in this case, the outer function creates a greet function with this name and closes over to the function greet. So in this case, we see that this variable, because it was created with this variable enclosure, so next time we use this function, it already knows about this variable. So it will say name equals to Kathy because of closure mechanism. So this is very handy for JavaScript, because when we attach a event handler or a timeout function or stuff like that, we can use this structure and we will be able to just carry that variable with us in the event handler without having to create a different class or global variable or a class variable or something like that, because it was with this function in context as a closure when it's got created in this case. Yeah, so here's the diagram we created in here so it closes over that name variable there. So greet has closure over name, and then now it can be passed around, because so when we call this greet Kathy, it knows about this name variable already. So it carries with it to become this event handler for this button. And so when we call that again, it will know about this variable already. So when the button gets clicked, it calls this function which knows about this name. So I hope this makes sense as to why we're using closure in JavaScript and how it is different from object programming and global variable and other mechanism of passing these variables around. Thanks very much.